afternoon and welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. In today's lecture on symbolic expression, we have with us Ms. Manisha, who is going to interpret the lecture in sign language. For discussion today, we have the topic as Introduction to Sociological Research. Sociological research is very significant because it enables us to understand the society around us. So in today's lecture, we'll see what is sociological research, what is the importance of sociological research, how do we carry out the process of sociological research, types of data, and similar understanding of sociological research. To start off, in the previous lecture, we have discussed the discipline of sociology. And we know that sociologists questions the world they live in. They kind of look around patterns of behavior, interaction, mobility, and structures of society. And in doing so, they're all the time trying to understand social reality. So, sociological research can be defined as the process of obtaining knowledge regarding society. Now, this knowledge could be critical, it could be informative, it could be descriptive, and it could be about different institutions like education, politics, economy, family, marriage, and so on. Conducting sociological research is very important. Why? Because it provides knowledge concerning the social world in which we live. It helps us to make sense of the reality and also many a time help in making policy, helps in predicting future. So sociological research often begins with the questions. You tend to ask a question about how things are or why things happen the way it is happening. So for example, we need to question why women were not going to school, say in a particular period of time. Or we need to question why the workforce participation for women is low. So by trying to answer a question, we will be able to understand gender relation in society. Sociological research helps us understand society and the institution that exist within it. The relationship between people, individual and group level, and the way people and institution tend to function with each other. So in the previous lecture, we talked about sociological perspective, and we learned that there are major perspectives like functionalism, conflict theory, symbolic interactionism. All of these perspectives have emerged by asking certain questions and doing research around these questions. So why is sociological research important? It is important because it impacts political and cultural influences that institutions have on people, and those influences work to benefit or detriment the people they interact with. So, there's so much of research on caste system. So, it helped us to understand the relation between members of different castes. It helped to understand exploitation, and from this we can have a policy in order to protect those who have been downgraded or those who have been exploited. Sociology helps to inform policy decision. For example, understanding the influence of cultural factor on economic outcomes of people of color, policy can be made directly to address not just the economic result but also the root cause. Many a time policies are not directed only towards the economic aspect. It has to take into account the social cultural dimension, and for this sociological research is needed. Sociologists can offer insight into interpersonal interaction and society-wide relationship on one another. sociologists can show how larger cultural issues like racism, casteism, communalism, violence, gender inequality kind of affect the everyday interaction as well as affects the larger macro level understanding. Now we know what is sociological research, what is the importance of sociological research. Now we'll try to understand the different types of sociological research. So the major research types are: number 1, survey; number 2, participant observation; number 3, experiments; number 4, documentary research; number 5, archival research. Now a researcher may use one or multiple of them to find out what they are interested in studying. Let us look into each one of this. So before we go into the discussion of survey method, let us understand how will a researcher choose the method. Now there are 4 factors that affects the selection of method. Number 1, resources. If it has ample resource to carry out large scale study, it will select a method which is suitable for large study. Number 2 is access to subject. Your method has to be dependent on how easily you can access your respondents, how easily you can interact with them and enable in your data collection. The third factor is purpose of the research. Purpose of the research is very crucial. Depending on what is the objective of the research, method would have to be selected. And fourth, which kind is contested or people kind of think about it, is the researcher's background. So the entire debate between subjectivity and objectivity in social science influences also the choice of the method. Now let us look into the types of research method. Number 1, survey. Survey is the most common method by which sociologists gather the data. What is the study? It is in the form and an interview or questionnaire that provide a sociologist with information about how people act or think. The researcher interviews a number of respondents to obtain information through face-to-face or telephone questioning. In the social media age, we also kind of circulate Google Forms to do survey. The researcher uses a questionnaire. A questionnaire is a kind of a list of questions that a researcher would ask the respondents related to his research topic or research questions. So most of the time it is kind of a written document. Now questionnaire can be open-ended or close-ended. Open-ended where the respondent kind of expresses his or her opinion, and close-ended where the researcher gives a number of choice: yes, no, true, false, and so on. So both the open-ended and close-ended questionnaires are used in survey method. The second method is participant observation. Now participant observation as a method is relevant in qualitative research. Qualitative research in the sense it's more descriptive. It's going to be more based on narratives, on explaining the lifestyle, the economic factor, political factor in detail of the community which the researcher is studying. Participant observation comes in from Malinowski, who kind of gave this idea that to do research, you need to spend a considerable amount of time with your respondent. So collecting information through direct participation or by closely watching a group of community. Now closely participating one needs to become an insider, because it's not very easy for someone to interact with an outsider. So researcher needs to become one like his respondent, so and build up a rapport with the community which is interested in studying, and therefore kind of do a participant observation. When sociologists join a group for a period to get an accurate sense of how it operates, so you either become an insider, participate completely in the everyday life, or you can be an observer. You just can observe the everyday life. Participant observation is kind of part of ethnography. Ethnography is a process or a method in qualitative research which describes the entire social setting through extended systematic observation. It is kind of giving a in-depth description of the society that the researcher is studying. It requires intense and often immersed long participation. So it has to be a participation within the community for say 6 months or 1 year or even more. So you get, as a researcher, will know in and out of that community, and you become one like the subject. So this is kind of also known as field work, intensive field work. The third method is experiments. Now, experiments are more common in physical sciences because you perform an experiment in a closed laboratory and you kind of come out with a result. In social sciences, it's kind of more found in psychology. Yet, some sociologists use experiment, though it is not a kind of very common or a powerful tool of social research. The advantage of experiments is they are done in natural and physical sciences. In social sciences, a researcher can be fairly sure of cause and effect relationship. You cannot be with it. It will certainly lead to the same cause or same outcome, because the experiment cannot be done in one fixed position. It varies from society to society, from case to case. Another method of social science research is documentary research. Documentary research involves examining text and documents as evidence of human behavior. It was kind of, if we were to look into, say, certain mythological text, so we rely on these texts to have an understanding of human behavior during that period. Now, documents can either be primary source, which are the original matter, they are not created after the fact with benefit of hindsight, or secondary source that cite, comment or build upon primary source. Now, primary source of data are the data that the researcher himself or herself generates. So, it's a first hand data. Secondary data is taking data from previous research like census or survey or any documentary report. Sociological research involving documents falls under cross-disciplinary purview of media studies, which encompasses all research dealing with television, books, magazines, pamphlets, or any other human recorded data. So we kind of, lot of data is available with the sociologist, and if the research is done primarily by focusing on the examination of relevant document, then it falls in the category of documentary research. The fourth type of social science research is archival research. Now, archival research is the study of existing sources. Archives is in kind of storage of data, and researcher depends on this for finding out answers to the research question. The study of source collected by someone other than the researcher is known as archival research or secondary data research. Archival research are basically used by the historians, but the importance is that it can help us to understand secondary data in twofold. By studying text related to their topic, researcher gains a strong foundation on which to base their work. So basically any social science research, literature review is important. So literature review is also kind of doing archival research. Second importance of archival research is that it is necessary in the development of central research question. In the process of going through the secondary data, several questions might emerge in the minds of the researcher, and that will help to kind of focus more on the objective of the research. Now, we'll try to understand the stages in the sociological research process. How do you go about doing a research? So, this is not necessarily the same, but it gives us a good idea of how a sociologist does the research, or we can call it as a process of research. So, the first stage or the first task for the researcher is to choose a research topic. The second, conduct an exhaustive literature review. Third, formulate a hypothesis or a set of research questions which will help the researcher to identify the objective of research. Number 4, measuring variables and collection of data. Number 5, analyzing data. And the last, drawing a conclusion. And when we draw a conclusion, it implies sharing the finding of your research with the wider population. Let us understand each of the steps in the process of research. Number 1, choosing a research topic. How do we decide what are we going to research on? And choosing a good topic for sociological research should clearly outline the problem or make an argument. It should be very clear what the researcher intends to do. It is recommended to avoid too general or vague statements that can be read or understood differently. So the statement of the problem has to be very specific and also clear. So for example, if I were to understand caste system, I have to be very specific that I choose a region and a specific dimension of caste system. If I choose something like caste system in India, it's vague and it can kind of be interpreted differently. It's very important to keep in mind that topics should inspire the researcher and help readers to find the solution. It should be something that makes a researcher think what he or she is interested in knowing, or how the research will contribute to knowledge, and that will help to decide the research topic. There are kind of different ways in which the research topics are influenced. Number 1 is theoretical interest. Many a times some people kind of get very close or kind of comfortable with a particular perspective or theoretical interest, and therefore the research topic would be similar. A social policy interest. And third is one or more personal experience. So these are some of the influences on choosing a research topic. The second step is conducting a literature review. Whatever topic is chosen, the next stage in research process is review of literature. A researcher who begins a new project typically reads a good number of studies that have already been published on the topic that the researcher wants to do research. A literature review has several goals. Why? Because why are you doing literature review? You should be clear. What will it enable? It will enable to determine the study the researcher wants to do or has in mind, and look into what kind of research has already been done in the specific topic. If the research has been done, then it is important to find out how the current research is different or how the current research is taking forward the research done earlier. The second goal of literature review is that researcher needs to determine how the proposed study will add to what is known about the topic of the study, because then the research will be more interesting, or it will get a wider appreciation. If one does the research on the same topic which is already done and everybody is aware of it, the significance of the research declines. The third step is formulating a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a kind of a very tentative statement, and in natural sciences or maybe psychology, the objective is to prove false or true. The hypothesis is either proved wrong or it is proved correct. In sociology, mainly in the qualitative research, we generally have research questions that will outline the nature of research. So, a hypothesis is a statement of relationship between two variables concerning the unit of analysis the researcher is studying. Unit of analysis refers to the type of entity a researcher is studying. The most common unit of analysis in sociology is person, but we have other units like the organization, geographical location. So these are all unit of analysis. A variable is any feature that may differ among the units of analysis that a researcher is studying. Variables are like gender, race, ethnicity, social class, age, and so on. Whatever unit of analysis is being studied, sociological research aims to test relationship between two variables, say caste and gender, or ethnicity and social class, to test whether the variable affects one another, and a hypothesis outlines the nature of the relationship that is to be tested. After the hypothesis construction, the next step is measuring variables in quantitative research and collection of data. It could be quantitative data or qualitative data. So, hypothesis is formulated, the sociologist is ready to begin the actual research. Data must be gathered via one or the research design, and variable must be measured. How is variable measured? Variable is measured through questionnaire in quantitative method. The answer a respondent gives to questionnaire are coded for computer analysis. Data gathered through observation, intensive interviewing, research design are qualitative. So, techniques of data collection, we have already talked about primary resources and secondary resources. Primary resources are the first hand data that the researcher collects. It could be through interview, it could be through questionnaire, survey, or observation. The secondary resources are the data that researcher gets from the existing resources. It could be statistics, graph, census data, reports, historical book, archival data, and so on. Then we have quantitative data and qualitative data. Quantitative data is numerical data, numbers. So you can have graphs, frequency tables, and such things. Quantitative are generally coming in from secondary resources, but it can be collected through primary sources also. Qualitative are those which is through description, narratives, through focus group discussion, through listening to the stories, case studies, transcripts, interview, and so on. So, we have both qualitative and quantitative research in sociology. Now, the next stage is analyzing data. After the data has been collected, the important stage is to analyze the data. If the data are quantitative, analysis is done through statistical software, statistical technique. You create frequency table, graphs, comparison, percentage, and so on. If the data is qualitative, you can still use statistical packages like SPSS and other, but it is more in the hands of the researcher to give a detailed description of the field work that the researcher has done. And therefore, the last stage or in the process of research is the conclusion. What is your finding? How is the question that you raised in the initial stage being answered? Is the research contributing to the construction of knowledge? It is critiquing the existing literature, or it is taking forward the findings of the research. So, through these processes, a sociologist are able to study and critically examine social reality. With this, I come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.